Some lawmakers want the government to fund the immediate restoration of the Manila Central Post Office, which is an important cultural property. We talk about its restoration and historical significance with conservation architect Michael Manalo. He was also the former NCCA head of Monuments and Sites. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. You've been into this historical monument countless of times, checking every nook and cranny, every angle and corner. What did you feel? What were your initial emotions when you found out that it was engulfed in flames?
Goodness, we were all in shock. We were really in shock. I woke up really early that day, and a friend of mine, Christian Aguilar, who lives about half a kilometer away, he was taking photos of the fire from his unit. So that's how I found out. It was like 5:30 in the morning, and right after that, we were just texting everyone and commiserating. Yeah.
It was declared an important cultural property in 2018.
Yeah.
You've been in and out of it. What is the structure made of this post office?
Goodness, like everything back then, this is the American period, right?
Yes.
So the fastest way to build anything back then was with concrete. Yeah, so the bulk of it is made of reinforced concrete, but it's not like the concrete you know of today, like hollow blocks and all of that. So this is built like a bank vault.
It's fortified.
It's
strong.
super fortified, but it's actually fun because it's a double wall of reinforced concrete. So imagine one wall and then airspace and then another wall.
So with this fire, Michael, of over 30 hours, this structure would not have collapsed.
Well, let's just look at it this way. It survived the war. It not unscathed, right? So you have photos from 1945, and the damage was much worse because there was shelling, there was bombardment.
Yes.
So you can imagine the impact on the structure back then. So now I wouldn't want to call it just a fire, but it did not have the physical impact of shelling back then, right? So if you see the photos from the war, it's very interesting because you have a hole, but it doesn't go through because there's another wall at the back.
Like
right?
what you said, it's like a bank vault.
Exactly, but a double wall. Other materials include wood. It won't be a Philippine building without wood. The Americans loved wood. So after it was reconstructed in 1946, they still utilized wood for it. So I guess that's the reason for like the length of time that it spent burning.
I was just looking at some background information on
Yeah.
the Manila Post Office. You said 1946, so it's been around 77 years since it was rebuilt after being damaged by the Battle of Manila during World War II.
Yeah.
Has it been renovated? Have some parts of the post office been rebuilt at any point from then until now?
You know, hardly. It's enjoyed an existence that is continuous. Maybe they would put like a roof on the 7th floor because it was a little too hot or something like that, or they can use the quadrangle right above for events or for assemblies, right? But else of that, the post office is as its reconstruction in 1946.
It's been a long time.
Really?
But with these tweaks that you mentioned, did they consult a structural engineer? Did they consult a conservation architect? Or was it just basically plastered there?
Well, that one we don't know. The records are very hazy. Normally, would have records in the DPWH. The DPWH has an archive. But when we checked the archive, the plans weren't there. So we did find some plans, but not of the post office, the main post office building. We found plans of other buildings by Federico Ilustre, by other architects and designers also. But sadly, the original plans from Juan Arellano, they're missing.
In 2019, Michael, your group came up with a conservation management plan.
Yeah.
To basically rehabilitate this structure. What was that? What was in that plan?
Wow, that's very interesting. The conservation management plan is anything and everything you'd need, for example, to conserve a building, but Because the first thing about conservation is you have to know why you're conserving the building, right? So you have to get to know the building first. So the history of the building appears, albeit in a very abbreviated form, but at least you know where it's coming from. And that's where we realized that this building is more than just a beautiful building, it's a machine. So it had to be efficient, right? It was patterned after the latest like American planning for post office buildings. It employed the latest technology back then, right? But then after that, you progress to looking at the physicality of the building.
But was there a timetable that was in place in this management plan that it has to be renovated over this period of time?
Well, that would have rested on Philpost. The client was Philpost, and we were very happy that Philpost actually looked into it, right? Looked into the conservation of the building. So hats off to Philpost for that. But then
the pandemic hit.
Exactly.
But was there a cost, an amount that
Not
you
yet.
put in this management plan?
Not yet.
Uh-huh.
Not yet, because it's just management. So you're looking at all factors. It's a general overview of how to manage the conservation of this building.
But a ballpark figure, Michael, would it have cost 10 million, 20 million, hundreds of millions, or billions?
Maybe not
Putting you in the spot.
billions, maybe not billions, but yeah, maybe a couple of hundred, probably.
But now it would cost much, much more that now that this historical monument has been gutted.
Yeah, well, that's it. Because you'd have to start by assessing it first,
Yeah.
right? And that will entail cost. So the first things to assess, of course, would be the structure. You know? It's the structural parts, the beams, the posts, all of the slabs, all of that. So a good friend of ours, Doc Mac Mendoza, was saying in our group that you need to do a petrographic analysis of the concrete to see what the impact of the fire was on the reinforced concrete.
But Michael, how long do you think will this assessment last?
Structural assessment would probably be for about 4 or 5 months. Yeah. So you'd go through that. But then, aside from the structural assessment, you'd also be evaluating other things. Like, are the significant elements still there? And we were pointing out to them that some of the significant elements that had survived the war were like grills, all of the metal elements, the lock boxes, the PO boxes.
Wow.
It was an amazing building. So when you went
Those
down...
are all treasures.
Yes. When you went down to the basement, you would see all of the lock boxes. You'd go to the back and you'd see how the lock boxes actually operate. So it's not just the physicality of the building. It's how the cadence of the building worked.
And if you would compare this major fire of the Manila Post Office to a structure that was also devastated and destroyed over the past few years, which one would that be?
Wow, probably we'd recall the Bureau of Customs in 2019. There was a fire that hit the Bureau of Customs.
What about overseas?
Overseas?
The Notre Dame Cathedral, people are
Well,
saying.
yeah, of course, the Notre Dame Cathedral, but we still don't know where it's headed. But if you want to see like a building that was sort of reconstructed, right, after flames hit it decades ago, that would be the Reichstag in Germany.
All right, after assessment, which you say which could take about 4 to 5 months, how long do you think will it take to rebuild and restore again the Manila Post Office?
That would be very difficult to say, but yeah, it's a couple of years really, maybe 3-4 years to restore it.
And Michael, do we really have the expertise? If you were asked to be part of this restoration, rebuilding of the Manila Post Office, will you step in?
Well, it would be an honor. It would be a great honor. Also because we already started the conservation management plan. To be called to service is something wonderful. Do we have the expertise? I believe yes.
We don't have to bring in experts from overseas.
Not really, not really.
All right.
We have talented engineers, we have talented craftsmen who can redo like the steel work. We have amazing carpenters who can redo all of the woodworks.
And final question for you, Michael. After its restoration, let's say 3, 4, 5 years, Should it remain a post office or should it be used as another facility? A multifaceted facility such as maybe a hotel plus shops and a museum, an extension of the National Museum.
Right. Well, that would ultimately be answered by PhilPost, right? If PhilPost still has the capacity, right, to be able to run not just PhilPost but this building. So, does it have the operations to fill it up?
And also the facility. Maybe
Yeah.
it could also be a joint venture between PhilPost and a private
right.
developer.
That's right. That's right. So I believe that before, when we were doing the conservation management plan, they were already looking at ways on like modernization, having like call center for the post, right, and parcel.
Thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much for joining us on The Final Word. Michael Manalo, a conservation architect and former NCCA head of Monuments and Sites.
My pleasure. Thank you.